There is a particular kind of person who never raises their voice, never seems to hurry, and is nonetheless the most frightening thing in the room, not because of what they might do to you, because you get the distinct sense, talking to them, that they worked out how this conversation would go before you arrived, and are being polite about it. You do not often meet one. The story we have been following on this channel has exactly one, and she is the last of its 4 class leaders, and she is the smallest person in the building. The most dangerous person at this school is 4'11", walks with a cane, and cannot climb a flight of stairs without help. That is not a twist. The story tells you almost immediately. What takes much longer to understand is that the frailty and the danger are not intention at all, that they are, in a strange way, the same fact seen from 2 sides, and that the girl who cannot compete in a single physical contest has spent her whole life becoming the one person in the building nobody can beat at anything else. Her name is Arisu Sakayanagi, and she leads Class A, and she is the last of the 4 class leaders we are going to look at on this channel. We have spent time with the other 3, Horikita, who arrived believing she needed nobody and spent 2 years painfully learning otherwise, Ryuan, who ruled by fear until someone broke him, Ichinose, who leads by love and was very nearly destroyed for it. Sakayanagi is the one at the top, and she is different from the other 3 in a way that goes deeper than method, because the other 3 are all, in their various ways, becoming something. They grow, or they fall and rebuild, or they are tested and change. Sakayanagi arrives fully formed. She is, at the start of the story, essentially what she is at the end of it. She does not need to grow, because in her own estimation, and largely in fact, she was simply born correct. That is the character, and it makes her the most fascinating and the most quietly monstrous of the 4. There is something structural about her worth noticing before we go further, because it is unusual and it is deliberate. She arrives late. The other 3 leaders establish themselves immediately. Horikita is in the first scene of the series. Ryuan is throwing his weight around within a few episodes. Ichinose breaks up a fight in a library early and is instantly legible as who she is. Sakayanagi is technically present in the very first episode, and it is a wordless, blink-and-miss-it appearance, a leader being quietly seated. Her first real scene comes several episodes later, and her genuine dramatic entrance, the moment where she stops being background and becomes a person with an agenda, does not arrive until roughly 25 episodes into the show. That is a long time to hold a character back, and the story does it on purpose because it is doing to you what she does to everyone else. She is the person operating from behind, unhurried, letting others exhaust themselves in front of her, entering only when it suits her. The structure of her introduction is itself a characterization. And then when she does arrive properly, she dominates. In the 3rd season, she is in 12 of the 13 episodes, the principal antagonist everywhere. Let me start with the body, because you cannot understand her without it, and because the story is careful about how it handles it, and I want to be careful too. She is the smallest of the 4 leaders, 150 centimeters, 4'11", lilac hair to her shoulders, violet eyes, and 2 things she is essentially never drawn without, a black beret and a cane. The cane is the single most legible visual fact about her. It is in nearly every scene she appears in from her first real appearance onward. She has a congenital condition, present since birth, that affects her mobility and her stature, and it permanently excludes her from any physical contest at a school where a great many contests are physical. I am going to leave it there deliberately. There is a specific medical term that circulates for her condition, and the sources genuinely conflict about it, and more to the point, the anime never names a diagnosis at all. What the anime shows is the cane, and the escorts who physically shield and support her, and the moments where she has to be caught and lowered to the floor by somebody else. What it says is only that it is a matter of health. So I will show you what the show shows, and not put a clinical label on a fictional girl. The story deliberately declines to label. What matters for the story is not the name of it. What matters is the shape it puts on her life. And the school, in its cold way, puts a number on that shape. In the first year, every student is assessed across 5 categories, and Sakayanagi's card is one of the most striking documents in the entire series. Academic ability, A. Intelligence, A. Decision-making, A. Physical ability, E-. 3 grades the top mark in every category that measures the mind, and then the absolute bottom of the scale, the lowest band that exists, in the one that measures the body, not a D, not an E, E-, the floor. That card is the whole character in 5 lines. Everything she can do better than almost anyone alive. The one thing she cannot do at all permanently, and no amount of effort will ever change it. And there is a detail about how the school handles that which is genuinely striking. When the second year brings in a new rating system, her physical score is not measured. It is assigned. The rule is that her physical rating is simply set to whatever the lowest physical rating in her entire year happens to be. The school does not evaluate her body. It looks at her, decides the evaluation is not meaningful, and hands her the floor value automatically. Think about growing up with that, being told, institutionally, in writing, that in one whole dimension of human capability, you are not even worth measuring. Now some people handed that become bitter, some become gentle. Sakayanagi did something else entirely. She looked at a world that had permanently locked one door, and she decided that she would be so completely, overwhelmingly superior at everything on the other side of it that the locked door would stop mattering, to her and to everyone else. And then she did it. It is worth staying with that E- a little longer, because it is the most important number in her story, and it is easy to read past. At this school, an enormous amount of what matters is physical. There are sports festivals, there are survival examinations on islands, there are contests of endurance and speed and strength, and the classes that win them gain real ground. It is not a school where the body is incidental. The body is roughly a quarter of the curriculum. And Sakayanagi is not merely bad at that quarter, she is excluded from it, not by choice, not by lack of effort, not by anything she could improve with training. She cannot participate at all, ever, in a whole category of the thing her school uses to sort people. Imagine how that feels at 15, in a place that measures you constantly and publishes the results. Every one of her classmates can, at least in principle, improve every one of their scores. She can improve 4 out of 5, and the 5th will read the same number on the day she graduates as it did on the day she arrived. Now, most stories would use that to make a character sympathetic, and this story partly does. But it also does something more interesting, which is to show you what a person of that intelligence might actually build on top of that fact. Because you have two options, really, when a door is permanently locked. You can spend your life resenting the door, or you can make yourself so formidable in every other room that the locked door becomes a footnote about you rather than the headline. Sakayanagi chose the second, and she chose it early, and she chose it with a completeness that shades into something unhealthy. She did not merely become good at thinking. She organized her entire identity around being the best mind in any room, permanently, without exception, because the alternative is being the small girl with the cane. That is why the Ko-NG nickname stings, and that is why the contempt for ordinary people is so total. If your whole self is built on being categorically superior, then every ordinary person is a small threat to the architecture, and the only comfortable position is one where almost nobody is worth considering. Because the mind is genuinely extraordinary, her academic ability is the joint highest of any student in her entire year. Her adaptability, the measure of reading a room and thinking on your feet, is second highest in the year, behind only Kushida, who is a professional at it. When the student council president, a famously severe boy who compliments almost nobody, went through the midterm results, he singled her out. He called her in personally to remark on how completely she had taken control of Class A within weeks of arriving. The only other student he was ever shown complimenting like that was Ayanokoji. And her particular talent, the specific game she is best at, is chess. Her official school profile lists it as her specialty, simply with no elaboration. She thinks more than 10 moves ahead. She factors in an opponent's personal habits and weaknesses as part of the position. And she does it fast, countering in seconds, because to her the board is not a puzzle to be worked through. It is a thing she simply sees. Chess is the right metaphor for her, and the story knows it. Chess is a game where the body is irrelevant and the mind is everything. It is a game of pieces, each with fixed capabilities, moved by an intelligence that is not itself on the board. And that is exactly how Sakayanagi views the school and the students in it, and quite possibly people in general. There is a small piece of evidence for the quality of that mind that I like, because it comes from an unexpected direction. Manabu Horikita, the student council president in her first year, is famously severe. He does not hand out compliments. He told his own sister she was not good enough and instructed her to leave the school. He singled Sakayanagi out after the midterms, and then he called her in personally, simply to remark on how completely she had taken hold of Class A in the few weeks since enrolling. The only other student he was ever shown complimenting like that was Ayanokoji. So the two people the most demanding student in the school considered worth noticing were the manufactured genius from the white room and the girl with the cane. He clocked both of them early, from the outside, on the evidence available, and he was right about both. Which brings us to the thing that makes her genuinely unsettling, underneath the politeness. Because she is polite, that is worth establishing. Her outward manner is soft-voiced and smiling and unfailingly courteous. She goes along with things. She accepts almost any situation without complaint. Nobody at that school has ever seen her lose her composure, not once in any circumstance. And underneath the courtesy is a worldview that is, put plainly, a belief in genetic aristocracy. Sakayanagi believes that ability is inherited, that a person born with superior material is simply on top, and a person born without it is not, and that education cannot manufacture talent where none exists. She considers herself to have inherited exceptional material, and she treats this as a settled fact about the universe rather than an opinion about herself, roughly the way you would treat the boiling point of water. And the consequence of believing that is contempt. Not loud contempt, not cruelty for its own sake, but a quiet, total, structural dismissal of anyone she has assessed as ordinary. Speaking privately about the other class leaders, the people the rest of the school regards as the most formidable students in the year, her assessment is that Katsuragi and Ichinose and Ryuen do not have a chance against her. Not that they are weaker, that they are not really in the contest. There is exactly one person she exempts from that judgment, and we will get to him. Now here is the thing that keeps her from being a cardboard snob, and it is the most interesting thing about her psychology. What Sakayanagi cannot tolerate is not failure, or defeat, or being challenged. It is boredom. Her very first characterized line in the entire series is a complaint that things have become boring, because no class is putting up a real fight against another. When Ryuen announces that he intends to crush every class in the school, her reaction is not alarm. She smiles and thanks him for making things interesting. That is the engine underneath everything she does. She's not driven by ambition, exactly. She is already at the top of the top class. There is nowhere to climb. She's not driven by malice. She does not appear to enjoy suffering for its own sake. She is driven by the need to be entertained, by a mind that is so far ahead of its surroundings that the surroundings have become tedious, and by the search for anything in that school capable of holding her attention. And when a person that capable gets bored, other people's lives become the entertainment. That is the whole danger of her, not cruelty, boredom in someone with the power to arrange things. It is worth comparing her motive to the other three leaders, because it is genuinely different in kind, and it explains why she behaves so differently. Horikita wants to reach Class A, and underneath that she wants her brother to see her as worth something, a human motive, and one that costs her enormously. Ichinose wants to protect her class, and underneath to earn back a self she lost at 13. Also human, also expensive. Ryuen wants to prove that everyone breaks, which is a belief he needs to be true about the world because of what it would mean about him if it were not. Each of those three is driven by something that hurts. Each of them is trying to resolve something. Sakayanagi is not. There is no wound driving her behavior that the story shows you, no thing she is trying to fix. She is at the top of the top class from day one and stays there. She has already won the game the school set. Her family situation is comfortable. Her father is the chairman of the school. And that turns out to be the problem. A person with nothing left to want, who is that capable, starts arranging things for amusement, and the things available to arrange are other people. It is not malice exactly, and it is somehow worse than malice, because malice at least takes you seriously. She takes almost nobody seriously. She is playing, and the pieces happen to be classmates. There is one more thing worth noting about her manner, because it is the thing that makes her genuinely difficult to fight. She is completely unbothered by everything. She goes with the flow. She accepts situations without complaint. She does not argue, does not posture, does not escalate. If a plan of hers fails, she updates and moves on, apparently without any of the ego bruising that would slow down a normal person. That is close to unbeatable psychologically. Ryuen can be provoked because his pride is the engine. Horikita can be frozen because her brother is a pressure point. Ichinose can be broken because her past is a wound. Sakayanagi has no visible handle at all. Nobody at that school has ever seen her lose composure in any circumstance, which means nobody has ever seen where she is soft. Except, of course, for Ko-Enji, who found it on the first try by accident and calls her little girl. Two more pieces of her before we get to what she actually does. The first is that she holds grudges, and she never ever shows them. The story is explicit about this, and it is worth watching for. When somebody knocked her over and made a crude remark at her expense, she behaved as though it had not affected her in the slightest. Composed, gracious, unbothered. And then later, on her own schedule, she destroyed him, having spent the intervening time pretending to be interested in him in order to set it up. That is a specific and rather chilling trait. Most people who hold grudges telegraph them. Sakayanagi files them, smiles, waits, and collects, and the person she is collecting from usually does not know a debt existed until it is being called in. The second is the one thing that genuinely gets under her skin, and it is small and it is revealing. Koenji, the impossible boy from Class D, has a nickname for her. He calls her little girl. And it lands, of all the things anyone says to her, that is the one that provokes her because it prices her at her body instead of her mind. Everything she has built, the whole towering intellectual apparatus, exists precisely so that nobody will look at a small girl with a cane and see a small girl with a cane. And Koenji, who is exactly as arrogant as she is and considerably less interested in her opinion, looks straight past all of it and calls her little. It is the one crack in the composure, and it tells you that the confidence, however genuine and however earned, is built on top of something that still hurts. There is a phrase in her official school profile that I keep coming back to, because it is either the funniest thing in the series or the saddest, and I genuinely cannot decide. The profile lists for each student their specialty and their hobbies. Her specialty is chess, which we would expect. Her hobby is listed as observing Kiyotaka Ayanokoji. Not chess, not reading, not anything a person would ordinarily put down. Her stated recreational activity, the thing she does for enjoyment, is watching one specific boy. She presumably wrote that herself, and she presumably knew exactly how it would read, and she put it down anyway, which tells you she is either entirely unembarrassed or enjoying the effect. Both are plausible. And it is worth noticing what it means about her days. Everyone else at that school has friends, clubs, small ordinary pleasures. Ichinose has half the school. Horikita eventually finds people. Even Ryuen has his gang, such as it is. Sakayanagi has a leash on one classmate, an opportunist who works for whoever is winning, a bodyguard, and a hobby that consists of watching somebody who does not know her. There is one more thing worth knowing before we go on, and it is a correction, because it is repeated constantly, and it is not true. You will often hear that Sakayanagi is the highest-rated student in her year. It is an easy thing to believe. She is the Class A leader. She is the designated final boss, the smartest person in the room. It is not what the numbers say. Her academic score is joint highest in the year, which is genuinely elite, but her overall rating, the combined figure, places her 10th among the second years. 10th, she's not even the highest-rated student in her own class, where 2 of her own classmates score above her. The reason is the physical score, the floor value the school assigns her rather than measures. It drags the total down, and there is nothing she can do about it. And I think that is worth sitting with because it is the story being quietly precise about something. On the specific axis where she is strongest, she is unmatched. On the aggregate, she is not, and cannot be, and never will be, no matter what she does. The school's own instrument says the frail girl is 10th. She knows that, presumably, and she has organized her entire life around making the aggregate irrelevant. Let me put her beside the other 3 properly, one last time, because having now covered all 4 leaders on this channel, the comparison is the most interesting thing the series is doing with them. The school built a competition and put 4 very different answers at the head of the 4 classes, and each answer has a shape and a cost. Horikita's answer is competence, and it costs her 2 years of painful growth. She starts unable to work with a single human being and has to be broken repeatedly before she can lead. Her class is built slowly, from nothing, and it is real. Ichinose's answer is love, and it costs her everything she has when someone works out that love centralized in one person can be attacked through that person. Her class is a family, and families can be hurt. Ryuen's answer is fear, and it costs him his entire worldview when he finally meets someone who will not break. His class obeys instantly and abandons him the moment he looks beatable. And Sakayanagi's answer is that the question is beneath her. She does not build a class. She does not need her class to love her or fear her or believe in her. She simply is, self-evidently, the person who should be in charge, and Class A arranges itself around that fact the way iron filings arrange around a magnet. She spends no effort on leadership at all, in the sense the other 3 understand it. And that works, it genuinely works. By the end of the animated story, her class is so far ahead of the others that the competition is effectively decided. But notice what it costs, and this is where the story is quietly making a judgment about her. The other 3 all change. Horikita becomes someone new. Ryuen is broken and rebuilds. Ichinose is tested to destruction and survives it, and comes out having lost the secret that was strangling her. Sakayanagi ends the animated story exactly as she began it. Same convictions, same manner, same contempt, same thesis. Nothing has touched her because she has arranged her life so that nothing can. She is the only one of the four who does not grow, and the reason she does not grow is that she has decided at 15 that she is already finished. Which is either the ultimate confidence or a rather sad thing to have concluded about yourself so early. The story does not tell you which, and I suspect it thinks it is both. So that is who arrives. A girl at the top of the top class with 3 grades and a floor, who is bored, who holds silent grudges, who regards nearly everyone as beneath serious consideration, and who is looking patiently for something worth playing against. And the first thing she does with all of that is turn it on her own class. Every leader in this story has to answer the same first question, which is how you get 40 individual people to move as one thing. And the answer that gets least attention, because it looks like no answer at all, is the one Sakayanagi gives, which is that you do not persuade them. You simply become the obvious center and let them arrange themselves around you. Except it is not that simple, because she did not inherit a unified class. She had to take it, and taking it meant a war, and the war is the first thing we ever see her actually do. Class A is the top class, and because it is the top class, it is the most difficult one to hold together. That sounds backwards, and it is not. Think about who ends up there. Ambitious students, individually excellent, most of them accustomed to being the best in whatever room they were in before. Put 40 of those people together, and you do not get harmony. You get a room full of people who each privately believe they should be running it. So Class A, from the first weeks, is split in two. On one side is Kohei Katsuragi. He is the class representative on paper, a genuinely capable student, serious and disciplined, and his entire strategic philosophy can be summed up in one word, which is preservation. Class A starts the year at the top with a commanding lead. Katsuragi's view is that the job is therefore not to win anything. The job is to not lose. Protect the lead, take no risks, spend nothing, let the other 3 classes exhaust themselves, and coast to graduation still on top. It is a defensible strategy. It might even be the correct one. In one examination, he instructs his entire class simply to refuse to speak, so that no traitor can possibly exist and the points split evenly. And when ichinose asks him about it, he tells her plainly that he is focused solely on maintaining Class A's lead. On the other side is Sakayanagi, whose philosophy is the exact inverse. Points are not a treasure to be guarded, points are ammunition, and the real loss, the only genuine defeat, is being bored. 2 people in one class with opposite theories of what the class is for, that is the war. And Sakayanagi wins it. And the way she wins it is the first proper demonstration of what she actually is. Because she does not win by out-arguing him. She does not win by outperforming him, or by rallying the class to her side with a better plan. She wins by arranging for Katsuragi to fail, publicly, in front of the people whose confidence he depends on, and she does it with such distance between herself and the act that most of the class never understands what happened. And there is a general lesson in how she does it that applies to everything she ever does, so it is worth naming now. Sakayanagi never attacks a class, she attacks the person holding it together. Katsuragi's faction is not defeated by outscoring it. Katsuragi is discredited, and the faction dissolves on its own. Class B is not beaten in an examination. Ichinose is broken, and the class is expected to collapse behind her. That is her signature, and it is the natural strategy for someone who thinks in chess terms, because in chess you do not capture a position, you capture the piece holding it. Remove the leader and everything they were supporting falls without you having to touch it. It is also, and this is the part that makes her genuinely dangerous rather than merely clever, extremely efficient. Beating a class in a fair examination is expensive and uncertain. Destroying one person's credibility costs almost nothing and can be done from a library, by telephone, through somebody else's hands, without ever appearing in the same room as the target. It starts with her not showing up. The first major examination of the year takes the whole grade to an uninhabited island for a week. Class A goes, 300 points in hand, Katsuragi commanding, and Sakayanagi is listed on the roster and marked as resigned. She does not participate at all. On health grounds, entirely legitimately, she sits it out, and the anime shows her back at school, playing chess in the library, running her operative by phone. That withdrawal costs Class A 30 points, straight off their 300, before Katsuragi has spent a single one. The exam's rules are explicit that a student unable to continue on health grounds costs the class 30 and retires. So the war begins with her taking a bite out of her own class's budget simply by existing. And while she is in the library, her people are on the island doing her actual work. Katsuragi, meanwhile, is making the mistake that ends him. He cuts a secret deal with Ryuen. Class C will hand Class A a substantial quantity of materials, and in exchange Ryuen will receive Class A's leader card, or a photograph of it. Katsuragi believes he is buying an advantage cheaply. He is being played from both directions at once, and he does not know it. Because Hashimoto, one of Sakayanagi's people, quietly leaks Class A's own leader to Ryuen independently. So Class C correctly identifies Class A's leader, which under the rules costs Class A the penalty, and wipes out every bonus point they accumulated across the entire week. Class A finishes third. And on the boat back, Sakayanagi says, more or less openly, that everything went exactly according to plan. The object was never to win the examination. The object was to make Class A distrust Katsuragi and to destroy the authority he had over them. It works completely. Katsuragi takes a savage review from his own classmates for the Ryuen deal. Hashimoto walks up to him and calls the whole thing pathetic to his face. Katsuragi, to his credit, is not fooled for a second about what has happened, and accuses Hashimoto directly of being the leak, which is correct and which changes nothing at all, because he cannot prove it and the damage is already done. Now I want to make sure the shape of that is clear, because it is easy to describe it as Sakayanagi sabotaging her own class and leave the impression that she is simply reckless. She is not. This is a calculation, and it is a cold one. Class A's lead over the other classes is enormous. It can absorb one bad examination without any real danger of losing its position. Katsuragi's credibility, on the other hand, cannot absorb one public humiliation, so she spends the one thing she has plenty of, class points, to destroy the one thing she wants gone, which is a rival's standing. The class survives, the rival leader does not. That is the trade she made, and she made it in the first term, and she was right about every part of it. It is worth being fair to Katsuragi for a moment, because he is the closest thing this story has to a decent, competent person who simply loses to someone better, and he deserves better than to be a footnote in her rise. His strategy was not stupid. Protect a large lead, refuse unnecessary risk, do not gamble with something you already have. That is genuinely how you defend a winning position, and if Class A had been a single unified class, it would very likely have worked. He is a serious student, disciplined, and by the school's own later ratings, he actually scores higher overall than Sakayanagi does. What beat him was not a better strategy. What beat him was that his strategy assumed his own class was on his side, and it was not. And there is something quietly bleak in that. He was defending Class A's position, faithfully, on behalf of people who were being turned against him from inside while he did it. Every point he carefully preserved was being spent by somebody else to remove him. He was playing the game the school had set. She was playing a different game entirely, one where the school's rules were simply the terrain. He works out what happened too. He accuses Hashimoto directly, correctly, and it changes nothing, because being right is not the same as being able to prove it, and the class has already made up its mind. That is a specific kind of defeat, losing while knowing exactly how you were beaten and being unable to do anything with the knowledge. It is worth pausing on her two instruments, because how she uses people is the character. Masumi Kimuro is her surveillance, and the relationship between them is captured perfectly in Kimuro's very first appearance, where she is standing holding an umbrella over Sakayanagi in a back alley. That is the dynamic in one image, one girl sheltered, one girl holding the umbrella. The mechanism of that loyalty is not friendship. Kimuro shoplifts, and Sakayanagi caught her at it near the start of the year and has held that over her ever since. Her official school profile lists Kimuro as her intimate student, the person she is closest to, and the closeness is a leash. Her standing orders to Kimuro tell you the whole arc of her attention, incidentally. First, watch Katsuragi, and then, once Katsuragi is finished as a rival, watch Ayanokoji instead. The surveillance simply moves to whoever is currently interesting. Stay with Kimuro for a moment, because the relationship is one of the bleakest things in the series, and it is easy to skim past. Her official profile names Kimuro as the student she is closest to, her intimate student, in the school's own wording. Of everyone in that building, Kimuro is the person Arisu Sakayanagi is nearest. And the entire basis of that closeness is blackmail. Sakayanagi caught her stealing at the start of the year and has been holding it over her ever since. So the closest relationship in her life is one she owns, not one she built or earned or was given. The person who follows her everywhere, holds her umbrella, runs her errands, and watches whoever she is told to watch, is there because leaving is not an option. And I do not think Sakayanagi experiences that as sad. That is what makes it sad. She is a person who is always there, who does what she needs, who is loyal in the only sense that matters operationally. By her own standards, that is a solved problem. Why would you want the unreliable kind of loyalty when the reliable kind is available? Masayoshi Hashimoto is her hands. He is the one who executes the sabotage, and later the one who physically spreads a rumor campaign we will come to. And he is her one genuinely unreliable subordinate, because his loyalty is to whoever is winning and nothing else. He has no real allegiance to her. And here is the detail I find most telling about the Civil War. Hashimoto is a pure opportunist whose entire skill is picking the winning side, and at the very outbreak of the leadership conflict, before any of it had played out, he assessed both candidates and joined Sakayanagi. The professional opportunist called it on day one. That is its own kind of verdict. There is one more thing about Hashimoto worth knowing, because it complicates the picture of her as somebody nobody actually cares about. At one point, Ryuen aims a kick at her, and Hashimoto takes it on his own arm to shield her face. The self-serving one, the one with no loyalties, physically puts himself between her and harm. The takeover in the end has no single dramatic scene. It is cumulative, and much of it happens off-screen, which is characteristic of her. Within weeks of enrolling, her grip on Class A is already conspicuous enough that Ryuen remarks on it, and the student council president calls her in to commend it. The island exam publicly breaks katsuragi. Later examinations get run on her judgment rather than his. Katsuragi eventually withdraws from the leadership contest altogether. And the final remnant of the Civil War is removed in the second year, when Katsuragi transfers out of Class A entirely to another class, and Sakayanagi's control of her own class is total and uncontested. She won a war inside her own class, against a genuinely competent opponent, and she did it without ever once appearing to fight. Which brings us to what she does when the war is over, and there is nothing left in her own class to hold her attention. She goes looking for something interesting outside it, and the thing she settles on is the kindest person in the school. I have told the ichinose side of this on the channel, so here I want to show you the same events from Sakayanagi's chair, because from her side it looks completely different, and the difference is instructive. From Ichinose's side, it is a catastrophe. Anonymous posts brand her a criminal. The true buried thing about her past is seated among a pile of lies, and she falls apart and stops coming to school. From Sakayanagi's side, it is a problem being solved efficiently. Her reasoning is not personal. She does not dislike Ichinose. She has assessed Class B as a structure and identified that, unlike a class held together by fear or by results, it is organized entirely around love for one girl, which means Class B does not need to be outcompeted. It needs to have its keystone removed, and it will come apart on its own. She has the secret, and she uses it. Through Hashimoto and Ichinose collapses, and Class B begins to fail exactly as predicted. There is a detail about the timing that makes it colder, and it is worth knowing. Sakayanagi does not attack Ichinose because Ichinose has become a threat. She attacks her because Ichinose is on her way to becoming one. The reasoning goes like this. Every defeat Ichinose suffers makes her slightly sharper, slightly less naive. Left alone, she will eventually become a genuinely formidable opponent, a person of real ability who has also, finally, learned to be shrewd, which means the correct moment to break her is now, while the wound from her past is still fresh enough to be reopened, before she grows whatever scar tissue would make her invulnerable. That is not revenge, and it is not rivalry. That is culling. You do not wait for a threat to mature. You remove it while it is still soft. It is the logic of somebody who has genuinely stopped seeing other students as people with their own stories and started seeing them as developing positions on a board. And there is one more thing that ought to be said plainly. The weapon she uses is a 13-year-old girl's shoplifting, done for a sick mother and a little sister, and the shame that has followed her ever since. Sakayanagi did not create that wound. She simply found it, assessed it as the most efficient pressure point available, and applied pressure there, because that is where pressure works. She would not describe that as cruel. She would describe it as correct. And that gap, between how it looks from outside and how it feels from inside her head, is the most frightening thing about the way she thinks. Now notice how she is positioned in that operation. She does not post anything. She does not spread anything. She does not appear anywhere near the message boards. Hashimoto does the work, and she stays entirely clean, and this is the pattern she has already run once on Katsuragi. She does not do things. She arranges for things to happen and then observes. And she loses. That is the part worth sitting with because it is the first time in this story that something does not go her way. Ichinose does not stay broken. She comes back, stands in front of her class, and confesses everything herself, and her class refuses to let her step down. They tell her they believe in her. The structure Sakayanagi identified as fragile turns out to be considerably stronger than her model predicted, because she had accounted for the class's dependence on Ichinose and had not accounted for the class's love for her. And Sakayanagi's response to being wrong is genuinely characteristic. She does not concede. She tells them more or less that a crime is a crime and they should not be so quick to trust her again. And then she praises their unity sincerely and announces that she will simply attack again another time. It is worth being precise about what she got wrong, because it is the only genuine hole in her model of people that the story ever shows. Her assessment of Class B was structurally correct. It really is organized around one girl. It really would fall apart if that girl were removed. Every piece of the analysis was sound. What she did not account for is that the people in Class B are not only dependent on Ichinose, they also love her. And love, unlike dependence, does not evaporate when the person is revealed to be flawed. It frequently does the opposite. When Ichinose stood up and told them the worst thing about herself, the thing Sakayanagi had counted on to break their faith in her, they moved toward her instead of away. That is the blind spot, and it is exactly the blind spot you would predict in someone who regards other people as pieces. If you think of a class as a structure with load-bearing elements, you will correctly identify which element to remove. What you will not see coming is that the structure might reach out and hold the element up, because structures do not do that and people do. She modeled Class B accurately as a machine, and it turned out to be a family. It is the one time in the whole series that her contempt for ordinary people actually costs her something, and it costs her the operation. No frustration, no embarrassment. The plan failed, the assessment is updated, the campaign will resume later. She treats her own defeat as new information about a board she is still playing. And then the whole thing is shut down from outside, when the school bans rumor-mongering entirely because the number of affected students has exploded. It exploded because Ayanokoji flooded the school with everyone's secrets at once, deliberately, to bury Ichinoses among hundreds. When Sakayanagi hears his name attached to that, her reaction is not annoyance at having her weapon destroyed. She is amused and she lives. Because the interesting thing has just happened, somebody countered her, and that is worth more to her than winning was. And there is a detail underneath that campaign which reframes the whole thing, and it is the sort of move only she would make. The secret reached Ayanokoji at all because Kamuro handed it to him, which looks, at the time, like Sakayanagi's own operative leaking to the enemy. It was not a leak, it was bait. Sakayanagi arranged for him to be given Ichinose secret, deliberately, because she wanted to see what he would do with it. The whole campaign against Ichinose was, at least partly, an instrument for measuring somebody else. He works it out afterward, from a detail so small it is almost absurd. When Kamuro handed him the evidence, the item involved had an expiry date on it that was far too old for recent theft, which meant it could only have come from the incident at the start of the year, the one Sakayanagi used to get her leash on Kamuro in the first place. Staged, therefore, handed over on purpose. So the girl who spent an arc trying to destroy the kindest person in the school was, underneath that, running a test on the one person she actually cares about, using a real girl's real trauma as the test material. And when he calls her on it, she is not embarrassed. She is impressed. She tells him he is an enemy worth defeating, and then she challenges him directly, and the stakes she proposes are not small. Now let me show you the other side of her, the personal side, because there is one and it is colder than the strategy. At a training camp, a boy called Haruki Yamauchi bumps into her and knocks her to the ground. And then, while she is down, he makes a crude remark at her expense. Ayanokoji sees the whole thing. He notices her demeanor change, just for a moment, and he apologizes on Yamauchi's behalf, says he did not mean it. And she says she understands. Her face says otherwise, and that is the only sign anybody gets. What follows is the most precisely vindictive sequence in the series. Sometime later, Sakayanagi contacts Yamauchi directly, a girl from Class A, the leader of the top class, ringing him personally. He is elated. Horikita tells him flatly that it is a trap, and he ignores her completely because he wants it to be real. She performs interest in him. She takes him out, and she brings Kamuro along, saying she is too embarrassed to go on a date alone. She tells him she would hate to see him expelled, and that he should come to her if he needs help. And then she instructs him to target someone else in his own class to protect himself, and Kamuro, following the script, suggests Ayanokoji as the sacrifice. When Yamauji panics, realizing that targeting somebody makes you a target in return, she gives him the thing that seals it. She promises him 20 of Class A's votes as protection. He goes and does it. He assembles roughly half his own class into a campaign against Ayanokoji, becomes insufferable in the process, openly calling himself the class's lethal weapon and taking visible pleasure in tormenting people, until even his closest friends are disgusted with him. And then he is exposed as the ringleader and becomes the target himself, exactly as he had feared. So he calls her to confirm the votes are coming. And she confirms that they are. Then she turns to her faction and tells them she had forgotten to mention something rather important. Class A's votes go to Ayanokoji instead. Yamauji is expelled by the exact mechanism he was promised protection from, using the very votes he was promised would save him, and the last thing he had before it happened was her reassurance. I want to be clear about what that punishment was for, not for betraying his class, not for being a poor student, for knocking her over and saying something crude while she was on the floor months earlier, in a moment she pretended not to notice. The offense was against her body. The retribution was executed entirely with her mind, on a delay, through a chain of people, without her ever raising her voice. That is Arisu Sakayanagi, and the boy never once understood that he had been on a schedule from the moment he opened his mouth. It is worth understanding the examination that killed him, because the rule she exploited is subtle, and it is the reason she could reach into another class at all. Every student gets 3 praise votes and 3 criticism votes for their own classmates. Praise cancels criticism. The student with the most criticism votes in each class is expelled, and the one with the most praise receives a protection point that can cancel an expulsion. So far, so contained, each class decides its own fate. Except for one additional rule, and it is the load-bearing one. Every student must also cast one separate, dedicated praise vote for student in a different class. That is the door. That single clause converts one class's votes into a weapon that can be aimed at another class's outcome, and it is why Sakayanagi could promise Yamauji 20 votes from Class A in the first place. Without that rule, her promise would have been impossible, and he would never have taken the risk. She read that clause and understood immediately what it made available. Almost nobody else did. And look at how the results actually landed for her. In her own class, she took the most praise votes, 36 of them, and in fiction verdict on her standing from the people who work with her every day. Whatever else Class A thinks of her, they value her. And her own class's expulsion did not fall on her, obviously, but on Yahiko Totsuka, who was Katsuragi's remaining lieutenant. So in one examination she settled a personal grudge in another class, protected the person she had decided was hers to beat, and removed the last significant member of her defeated rival's faction from the school. 3 objectives, 1 set of votes, no fingerprints. There is a footnote to it that is colder still, and it reframes the whole thing. Afterwards she tells Ayanokoji that she had received a message from someone asking her to have him expelled, and that she had been told the examination would likely make cross-class removal easy. So she had known, going in, that an adult wanted him gone, and that she had the means to do it. And she protected him, not out of affection, because she was not prepared to let somebody else take her opponent away before she was finished with him. Yamauji's destruction was the personal debt. Ayanokoji's protection was the strategic one. They happened to be the same handful of votes, and she spent them once and collected on both. There is one person at that school she has never dismissed, and the story of how she came to know him is the best scene she has. She arranges it carefully, which is characteristic. She has Kamuro bring Ayanokoji to the 3rd floor of the special building, and she has chosen that location specifically because it has no surveillance cameras. Then Kamuro leaves, and the 2 of them are alone. And she opens by telling him it has been 8 years and 243 days. He says that is impossible. He has no memory of ever meeting her. So as he turns to leave, she says 2 words. White room. And he stops. That is the whole reveal, delivered in a corridor, by a girl leaning on a cane, to a boy who has spent the entire story making certain that nobody in the building knows what he is. She knows. She has known since before either of them enrolled, and she has been sitting on it patiently, waiting for the moment it would be most interesting to use. Then she tells him the rest of what she has worked out, that she knows he was behind Class D's results, the island, the cruise ship, the expulsion business, that she could never believe it was all Horikita. He denies it, points to other people in his class who could have done it. And she says something that tells you exactly what she is. She has no intention of exposing him. Because, in her words, she is the only one worthy of burying the false genius. That is not a threat, quite. It is a claim of ownership. She is not going to tell anyone what he is, because telling people would mean somebody else might get to beat him, and she has decided that beating him is hers. He asks her seriously whether she really could, and she laughs and says she has already begun to enjoy herself, and then states the thing she actually wants, which reframes her entire character. She intends to realize her dearest wish by destroying the greatest masterpiece his father ever made. Let me unpack that, because it is the key to her. Her father is the chairman of the school, and when she was a child, he took her to visit the White Room, the facility where children were engineered into prodigies, the place that produced Ayanokoji. And among all those children, all of them being manufactured into something exceptional, one boy held her attention. He was playing chess, and he was demolishing every opponent they put in front of him, one after another calmly, without apparent effort. Her father told her the boy's name. And standing there as a child, looking at the most impressive person she had ever seen, Arisu Sakayanagi decided something that would organize the rest of her life. She decided she would beat him, beat all of them, because she believed and still believes that talent is decided at birth and not by training, that she had inherited superior material, and that no amount of manufacturing could produce someone who could defeat someone simply born better. That is why she does not care about Class A, or about points, or about winning the school's competition. Those are not the game. The game is a thesis she has been trying to prove since she was small, and the only experiment that can prove it is beating the boy from the room full of engineered children. Everything else, the Civil War, ichinose, yamauji, all of it, is what she does while she waits for the real contest. And I should be careful here about one thing. The full philosophical version of that reasoning, her father's own doubts about the experiment and the promise she made him, lives in the novels rather than on screen. What the anime gives you is the White Room visit, the chess, the line about 8 years and 243 days, and her stated ambition to destroy the masterpiece. That is enough, but I would rather tell you the boundary than hand you novel interiority as though you had watched it. It is worth sitting with how long she has been carrying this, because the arithmetic is startling. 8 years and 243 days. She did not say roughly 8 years. She gave him the number of days. That is a person who has been counting, who has at some level been keeping a running tally since childhood of the time between meeting the boy who would become the object of her life's argument and finally getting to speak to him again. And when the moment comes, she opens with the count, because she wants him to understand immediately that this is not a chance encounter. It is an appointment she's been keeping for the better part of a decade, while he had no idea she existed. There is something almost lonely in that, underneath the menace. She has organized her whole self around a single person who does not remember her, over a thesis nobody else knows she is arguing, aimed at an audience of a father who may or may not be paying attention. Every social interaction she has at that school, every faction and rivalry and scheme, is essentially a way of passing time until the real thing. And when she finally gets to say it out loud, in a corridor with the cameras off, she is not angry or triumphant. She is delighted. She has been waiting to be interested for 8 years, and it is finally happening. The contest, when it finally comes, is the last examination of the first year, and she builds it herself. The format is that each class appoints a commander, and the classes compete across a series of events. The stakes for the commanders personally are severe. The winner takes private points, and the loser is expelled from the school. Class A's commander is Sakayanagi. Ayanokoji's class puts forward Ayanokoji. And look at what she registers as her class's events. International chess, English quiz, modern literature quiz, mathematics quiz, flash mental arithmetic. Every single one is cerebral. There is not one physical event on the list. She has built an examination that a body cannot win. A girl who has been assigned the floor value on physical ability by her own school has designed a contest in which the body is entirely irrelevant, and she has done it with a straight face, and it is completely within the rules. I want to make sure the audacity of that event list registers, because it is the single cleverest thing she does in the entire story, and it is easy to nod past. The examination lets each class register the events it wants to compete in. Most classes would balance the list, hedge, cover their weaknesses, register a mix so that a bad draw does not sink them. She registered 5 cerebral events and nothing else: chess, English, literature, mathematics, mental arithmetic. That is not a strategy for winning an examination. That is a person reshaping the terrain so completely that the terrain itself becomes an argument. A girl with a physical rating of E-, in a school where physical contests are a quarter of everything, has constructed a competition in which the body does not exist. Her own decisive weakness, the one thing about her that cannot be improved, has been legislated out of the contest by the rules she was invited to write. And she was invited to write them. That is the point. The examination handed every class the same opportunity, and only one person saw that the real move was not choosing good events but choosing a category of events. The others picked things they were good at. She picked a definition of competition. Class A wins 4 events to 3, and she personally wins the last one, the chess, against Ayanokoji. She beat him, on the record, in the school's own results. The frail girl with the cane defeated the White Room's masterpiece at the game she had been chasing him toward since she was a child. Except she did not. Because there was interference. An adult, an acting director with his own agenda about removing Ayanokoji from the school, had tampered with the system and altered one of Ayanokoji's moves to an inferior one. She did not know during the game. She found out afterward. And her reaction to discovering that she had won by cheating she did not commit is disappointment, and a remark that adults should not disturb children at play. So she does something about it. She politely asks him for another game, in the library privately, with nothing at stake, and she asks him to play the move he had actually intended. He does, and she is checkmated. The two of them compliment each other afterward, and Ayanokoji tells her that within a few more games she would beat him handily, because of how quickly she is improving, which from him is close to extravagant praise. But sit with the shape of it. The public record says Arisu Sakayanagi beat Kiyotaka Ayanokoji at chess. The private record, known to exactly 2 people, says she lost. And she is the one who insisted on finding out. That is the most admirable thing she ever does, and it is worth being generous about it, because I have spent 2 parts of this telling you how cold she is. A person who only wanted to win would have kept the trophy. She had the result, it was official, nobody would ever have questioned it, and it was worthless to her, because a win she did not actually earn does not prove her thesis, and the thesis is the only thing she cares about. She would genuinely rather know she lost than falsely believe she won. There are not many characters in this story you can say that about. And it tells you what the thesis actually means to her, which is that it is not vanity. A vain person wants to be seen winning. Sakayanagi wants to be right, and being seen to win while secretly being wrong is not a lesser version of that. It is the opposite of it. It would poison the only thing she cares about. There is also something worth noticing about the stakes she agreed to, because they were not small. In that examination, the losing commander is expelled from the school. Not demoted, expelled. She put her own place at the school on the table to play him, when she was under no obligation to command at all, when she could comfortably have sent somebody else and kept her position safe. She wanted the game badly enough to risk everything on it. A girl whose entire life is organized around a single argument put her entire future on one chessboard, and then, when she won it dishonestly, insisted on finding out that she would actually have lost. That combination, willing to risk everything and unwilling to accept a false result, is the closest thing she has to integrity. It sits inside a person who engineered a boy's expulsion over an insult and tried to break a girl using her childhood shame, and both things are true at once, and the story does not reconcile them for you. There is one more thing about her relationship with him, and it is the strangest, and I want to give it to you carefully because this is exactly where retellings drift into material the anime has not shown. What the anime gives you, fixation, open, undisguised, delighted fixation. Her official school profile lists her hobby as observing Kiyotaka Ayanokoji, which is either a joke or an admission and possibly both. She protects him publicly. She tells teachers that the two of them are childhood friends, which surprises them. She argues to the faculty that she should be permitted to openly favor him, on the grounds that people have friends across class lines and feelings can outrank class loyalty. And she is precise about the limits of that favoritism. It applies to him and to nobody else. Once the threat from the adults is dealt with, she says, she will go back to crushing his class without hesitation. That distinction is worth dwelling on because it is the most honest thing about her, and it is genuinely unusual. Most people protecting somebody would extend a little grace to the things around them, his friends, his class, the people he cares about. It would be natural, and it would cost nothing, and it would make her look better. She refuses to do it. He is exempt. Everyone standing near him is not. She will shield him from an adult conspiracy on Monday and try to destroy the class he sits in on Tuesday, and she sees no contradiction whatsoever because there is not one. Her attachment is to a specific person, not to a side. There is something almost clean about that, in a story full of people whose loyalties blur. She has drawn a line exactly one person wide and told everybody where it is. And it means she is the only antagonist in the series who is genuinely impossible to negotiate with. You cannot appeal to her class loyalty because she has none. You cannot appeal to friendship because she has one and it is not with you. You cannot frighten her because nobody has ever found the handle. The only thing she wants is to be interested, and the only thing that interests her is a boy who is not for sale. What the anime does not give you is the interior version, the version where the feeling has a name. That exists, and it is in short stories rather than in the show, and I am not going to narrate you a girl's private heart from a source the animation has not adapted. What is safe to say, because she says it publicly, is her stated ambition for the following year, to lead a school life that is interesting, and to protect her beloved person from unwanted vermin. Make of that what you like. She left it deliberately ambiguous, and I think she enjoyed doing so. There is a related moment worth knowing, because it is one of the few times we see her physically vulnerable in front of him. Immediately after one of their conversations, the acting director introduces himself, and then kicks her cane out from under her. Ayanokoji catches her and lowers her gently to the floor. The man then orders him to withdraw from the school, and Ayanokoji does not retaliate, does not react at all. And afterward on the ground, Sakayanagi tells him that not fighting back was the correct decision, because the claim that the cameras were switched off could easily have been a lie. Two things in that: an adult used her body against her as a tactic, casually, to provoke a boy. And her response, seconds after being knocked to the floor, is a cool tactical assessment of whether he handled it correctly. She does not get angry, she files it, the way she files everything. The adults are worth a moment, because they are the one force at that school she cannot simply outthink, and the story is careful to show her running into them. Her father is the chairman, and in the second half of the story he is suspended, and an acting director is installed in his place, specifically in order to remove Ayanokoji from the school. That is not a student rivalry. That is institutional power, wielded by adults with their own history with Ayanokoji's father, and it operates entirely above the level where Sakayanagi's cleverness works. She responds by doing something she has never done for anyone. She asks for an exception, openly, from the faculty. She goes to the teachers and argues that she should be permitted to favor Ayanokoji. Her case is interesting. The school pits classes against each other, yes, but people have friends and lovers across class lines, and feelings can, in practice, outrank class loyalty, so she is not going to pretend otherwise. She will favor him. And she is precise about the boundaries of it in a way that is very her. The favoritism applies to him, only him, not his class, not his friends. Once the threat from the adults is dealt with, she says, she will go straight back to crushing his class without hesitation. A teacher accepts this as a workable compromise, which tells you something about how she is regarded by the staff. But look at what she has just done. Arisu Sakayanagi, who considers essentially everyone beneath her notice, has walked into a room full of adults and asked permission to protect somebody. She has publicly declared an attachment. For a girl whose entire architecture is built on needing nothing and no one, that is an enormous admission, and she makes it in front of witnesses, in writing, more or less on the record. She would probably tell you it was strategic. It is not obvious that it was. So where does the animated story leave her? At the top and unchallenged, and rather more alone than before. Her class is hers completely. The last remnant of the Katsuragi faction is gone from Class A, and her class's points at the end of the animated story are not close to anyone else's. Roughly twice the totals of the classes below her. The competition the school designed is, as far as Class A is concerned, essentially over. Sit with that number for a second, because it is the quiet answer to the question the whole series poses. The school's entire premise is that the classes compete, that Class D can climb, that where you start is not where you finish. Horikita's whole arc is organized around reaching Class A. Ichinose's class is fighting for it. Ryuin wants it. And at the point the animation stops, Class A has roughly double the points of every one of them. Not slightly ahead, roughly double. All that striving, all those examinations, all the growth and suffering and clever schemes from 3 classes, and the gap to the top is enormous and has been the entire time. The girl at the top did not have to fight for that. She inherited a class that was already ahead, spent her first year winning an internal power struggle rather than an external one, and has been comfortably in front ever since. There is an argument buried in that about the school itself, and it is not a kind one. The place tells its students that anyone can climb. Its own scoreboard says the class that started at the top is still at the top by a mile. And her second year is quieter than her first, which is worth noting rather than glossing. The Great Civil War is over. Katsuragi is gone. The Ichinose campaign failed and was shelved. What she does in the animated second year is mostly manage a dominant position, participate in the examinations, and of all things, ally with Ichinose, the girl she tried to destroy, because circumstances made it useful. That alliance is very her. No grudge, no awkwardness, no apology either. Ichinose was an obstacle, then a failed target, and now a useful partner, and the shift between those states cost Sakayanagi nothing emotionally because none of it was ever personal in the first place. Her own ratings tell the same story with the same asterisk we started with. Her academic score is at the very top of her year. Her adaptability is near it. Her physical score is the floor value the school assigns her rather than measures. And her overall figure, the combined one, puts her 10th in the year and 3rd within her own class, behind 2 of her own classmates. That gap between being the best mind in the school and being 10th on paper is the whole of her in one number, and it never closes. She ends the animated story allied, of all things, with Ichinose, the girl she tried to destroy. She ends it having lost a chess game that the record says she won. And she ends it holding an unredeemed favor owed to her by Ayanokoji, which is the sort of asset she likes best, because it is not a point or a rank but a claim on a person. That favor is worth a thought. Because of all the things she could have taken from him, she chose the one with no fixed value. She could have asked for points, for information, for a concession in a future examination. Any of those would have been concrete, bankable, immediately useful. Instead, she holds an open claim, unspecified, to be redeemed whenever she likes for whatever she likes, which means the boy she has been chasing since childhood now owes her something and does not know what. It is the most Sakayanagi possible asset. It is not worth anything today. It is worth exactly as much as she decides it is worth on the day she uses it, and until then it simply sits there, between the two of them being interesting. And I suspect that is the actual point. A debt is a reason to come back. A favor unredeemed is a thread still attached. She has spent 8 years and 243 days getting his attention, and having got it, she has arranged matters so that the connection cannot quietly lapse. You could call that strategy. You could also call it a girl making sure the interesting person has a reason to talk to her again. It is worth saying plainly where the animated story stops with her, because unlike some characters, her arc is clearly unfinished, and there is material past this point that I am not going to reach for. What we have is her first year and roughly the first half of her second. The Civil War, the Ichinose campaign, the Yamauji affair, the chess match, and a second year in which she sits comfortably at the top with her class's position essentially secured. There is more of her story in the source material, and some of it is significant, and none of it has been animated. So this is where we stop. It is a reasonable place to stop, because the shape is complete even if the story is not. You have seen how she thinks, what she wants, what she is willing to do to get it, and the one moment where she chose the truth over the trophy. So what do you make of Arisu Sakayanagi? She is the story's argument about what raw ability actually is, and the argument is not flattering to her. She genuinely is the most gifted mind in the school. That is not arrogance, it is simply true, and the school's own numbers agree on the axis that matters. And what she has done with that gift, across the whole of the animated story, is destroy a rival inside her own class, attempt to destroy the kindest girl in the year, and engineer the expulsion of a boy who insulted her. She has built nothing. Horikita built a class. Ichinose built a family. Even Ryuin in his way built something, and then rebuilt himself after it broke. Sakayanagi has been at the summit the entire time and has used the position exclusively to arrange other people's failures, because she is bored, and because boredom in someone that capable is genuinely dangerous. And the story is quietly clear about the source of it. A child was taken to a facility, shown a boy who was better than her, and told that this boy had been made. and she decided, at whatever age that was, that she would spend her life proving that being born right beats being built right. Everything since has been a demonstration aimed at an audience of one. She is not playing the school. She's playing her father's assessment of the world, and every student she has taken apart along the way has been a step in an argument they are not even aware is happening. The most gifted person in the school, who has never once used any of it for anything except proving a point about herself. There is a question I want to leave you with, because I think it is the one the character is actually built around, and the story is too disciplined to answer it. Her whole thesis is that ability is innate, that you are born with what you have, that training cannot manufacture genius, and that she, born with excellent material, cannot lose to a boy who was assembled. Now think about what she has spent the entire story doing. Studying, planning, running intelligence operations, building factions, practicing chess to a level that would be respectable nationally, improving so quickly that the person who beat her says a few more games and she will be past him. Working, in other words, constantly and enormously hard at the very thing she claims cannot be improved by work. If talent were really settled at birth, none of that effort would be necessary. She could simply turn up. The fact that she does not simply turn up, that she prepares obsessively for a single opponent over the better part of a decade, is the loudest possible argument against the thing she says she believes. And there is a second problem with the thesis, which is that if she ever does beat him, cleanly, she will not have proven what she wants to prove, because by then she will have spent years training for it. The victory would be evidence for his side of the argument, not hers. She may know this, she's certainly clever enough, and there is something almost poignant in a person that intelligent organizing her whole life around an argument that quietly cannot be won on its own terms, in front of a father who may not even be watching. The thing she actually seems to want, when you strip the philosophy away, is simpler and more human than the thesis. She wants somebody in the room to be worth talking to. She spent 8 years counting the days until she could talk to the one person who might be, and when she finally got him alone in a corridor, she told him the number. That is not a philosopher pursuing a proof. That is a very lonely, very gifted girl who has been bored since she was a child. The most dangerous mind at that school, 4'11", leaning on a cane, who has never once used any of it for anything except proving a point about herself. And underneath all of it, the girl who insisted on playing the game again in an empty library so that she could find out honestly whether she had actually lost. Sleep well.